My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
We have a controversial main event to talk about in Portland. We have a huge card coming up for UFC this weekend in Manchester, England. And we even have a World Series of Fighting card with 2 title fights on it. All of this and a lot of news. Some good, some bad, and some really ugly. So it's a very newsworthy show.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's quite the weekend, and especially if you got tickets for the Manchester show because, well, the main event doesn't start till 3 or 4 in the morning?
Yeah, so good luck with that if you're there live, because they're doing it based on our time zone, not yours.
Oh boy. Alright, so let's just get into it. We'll start with the show in Portland, and the main event, John Dodson against John Lineker. The only thing for certain, Stevie, John was winning this fight.
Yeah, that I think is a safe bet. Now, which John do you think won the fight? Because nobody seems to agree.
So, I had it 3 rounds to 2 for John Lineker, who did win the fight. It was a split decision. This is, without hyperbole, in the conversation for fight of the year.
I don't know if those 4th and 5th round are fight of the year.
But the first 3.
First 3, maybe. All I know is John Lineker missed weight and somehow still came up with the split decision in his favor, which just doesn't seem right.
So you're punishing him because he missed weight, or you're punishing him because you think he lost the fight?
You know, if I watch this fight 10 times, I'll probably have a different conclusion 5 out of 10 times for each fighter. When I watched it initially, I felt like in the 4th and 5th round, even though Dodson was doing a lot of evading, and some might call it running, when he did land shots, he was landing more often and more accurately.
There's a lot you could take away from this fight, and we don't have enough of a show just to focus on it because we could be here all night long and then cover the Manchester show. But still, it goes to octagon control, it goes to effective striking, it goes to a bunch of factors, and it's a very razor-thin fight. I actually watched this fight twice. I wanted to see it the next day with a fresh set of eyes to see if my score of 48-47 was the correct score. And with the benefit of a second viewing, I looked at my card and I was like, no, I got it right the first time.
All right, well, I think 48-47 Dodson is the right score, but if you disagree, you disagree. Now,
here's the $64,000 question, though. Do you rematch this fight?
You know what? I don't even have any enthusiasm for seeing John Lineker at 135 pounds now. And I didn't when he was a flyweight because he couldn't make that weight. And if he can't make it at bantamweight, then screw it. He has to move up to featherweight. I don't want to see a rematch of a guy that can't make one weight class, let alone 2.
Or he goes on the Anthony Johnson diet and picks one weight class and dominates.
Well, that has to be featherweight then, because he can't make the bantamweight limit either. Even though he went on and on about how he proved he deserves a title shot by the number of fights he's won in a row. Yeah, and that's also the number of fights you missed weight in a row, buddy, so you're not proving anything to me.
Now, with the loss, does Dodson, in your opinion, go down in the rankings even though the fighter who beat him missed weight?
I hate to say it, but he probably drops a spot. I don't think you should really severely drop him in the rankings considering the circumstances, but he didn't have to agree to take the fight. And based on the fact that he did, and it was a competitive fight, and he came up short, at least in the eyes of the judges, you still have to take that into account when you're ranking him.
But it's few and far between when you have a fighter who turns down a main event fight because his opponent missed weight.
Well, I think John Dodson probably would have realized that he wouldn't be in many more main events if he did that. So it's in his own interest to do it, although they could have just paid him his show money and he could have walked away. But he probably also thought, besides the fact that I'm doing UFC a solid, what if I get the fight and win the fight, and then I get my bonus and not just my show money, I get my win money too. And if I'm Dana White, I'd give him some win money anyway based on this fight.
I'm sure there's some under-the-table rewards that we're not going to see officially on paperwork.
Right.
But
he deserves it for taking a fight where his opponent missed weight, and arguably, again, we can't spend the whole show on this one fight, but arguably he might have gotten screwed by the judges here.
You know, the only thing I could say is, for this fight, Lineker, I agree with you, should go up to featherweight, but what about Dotson? Does he get to choose his next opponent, or do you think they're going to give him someone that, do you give him like a number one contenders fight? Do you give him, like, not a reward, but do you do something where, you know what I'm trying to say?
I think you give him another fight in the top 15 against an opponent that he matches up well with. I think you can't just let him pull a name out of a hat and say that's the guy he wants to fight, because that may not be their plan right now. But you can at least give him a fight where he gets to show that the Lineker fight, you know, he can prove his point that it really should have gone his way and it didn't, and he can go out there and showcase himself.
All right. Well, we should move on, and if you think we're sick of fighters missing weight before, seriously?
Yeah, 160.
Seriously?
161, if you'll let me spit out the number, 161 and a half.
I'm just trying to accentuate the frustration. This is a fight. If I was Will Brooks, I'd be like, nope. Like, it's not the main event. Nope. Not taking it.
Yeah, well, he gambled and he lost here, because not only did it not go well for him, but he's probably got a broken rib now on top of everything else.
And was it my imagination, or was Oliveira
being disrespectful?
Thank you. I was thinking of a different word, but that works.
He did a D-Generation X salute.
And
Will Brooks, even as beat up and hurt as he was, and trust me, when he went down at 3 minutes, 3:30 in the third round, he was hurting pretty bad, because even before that, he was wincing every time he moved or clinched, so his rib was already jacked up. And then once he started getting pounded on the ground, he was like, you know what, I'm already in too much pain, I'm not even going to try to fight back. And it gets stopped, Oliveira throws the crotch chop, and Will Brooks, as in pain and beat up and TKO'd as he just was like, really? Really? And throws out his mouthpiece and charges after the guy. Like, it's not necessary to do that. Nobody involved is right there. I mean, Oliveira's in the wrong for throwing the crotch chop. Will Brooks is in the wrong for losing his cool and going after him and causing a ruckus. Nobody wins in this situation.
It's reminiscent of last week's show when, there was an incident where a fighter lost his cool. And I really hope, Stevie, that this is not the new normal.
I don't think it's the new normal. I think Will Brooks, if you know his history in Bellator, he's a guy that is very capable of getting under his opponent's skin. That's one of his trademarks, is that he plays mental games with the people he's fighting and gets them out of their comfortable headspace by talking all sorts of stuff. And I think Oliveira took it so personally that he decided with a win he was going to be personally disrespectful to him in the octagon, which to me is different from playing mental games to build up a fight.
Now, we talked about someone losing the fight after getting beat by the guy who missed weight. With Brooks, he's coming into UFC with a storied Bellator career. Do you think this puts the slow, not slow burn, but do you think it derails his ascent into UFC just a little bit by this loss?
I think because of the large amount of weight that Oliveira missed the fight by, I don't think this gets held against Brooks. I think he might lose a spot in the rankings, but I don't think he loses a spot in the eyes of the promotion or the matchmakers. I think they'll look at this fight as virtually being a no contest. Like, you went out there, you fought a guy that was probably 25 pounds bigger than you. You didn't have to do that. You took the loss, you got injured, but you still gave us our co-main event, so we'll continue to push you like a top guy.
My only request for this fight, the result of this fight, is that Oliveira's next opponent comes from the same fight camp as Will Brooks.
Well, that would definitely be doable because Brooks laid down a proclamation after the fight that if Oliveira even tries to set foot in American Top Team, anybody from ATT will whoop his ass on the spot.
No, I'm not talking the water boy. I'm sure anyone who sets foot in that building wants a piece of him.
You bet.
All right. Zach Atau beating Josh Berkman. Yes, Atau beat Berkman, split decision.
I can't say I'm really surprised because Berkman didn't show a whole lot in this fight. In fact, I wouldn't say it was outright boring, but it was not exciting.
How far has Berkman slid now?
Well, I guess that depends on what you define as slid. Like, what's your definition? I mean,
I'm not saying he's a gatekeeper, but another loss like this.
Well, it's starting to look like his last greatest peak of his career was, for whatever this is worth, World Series of Fighting.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah,
that's where he was doing the best because he was running through people. He beat John Fitch, Aaron Simpson, Gerald Harris. The only fight he lost was the inaugural fight for the welterweight title. And after that, things have just not gone well for him.
See, I think this fight, it doesn't really mean he's done. I see this fight, split decision, never leave it to the judges. I always say this on this show. I think his next fight will be very telling as far as, does he still have the it factor? Or is he just mailing it in, so to speak?
Is he going to get it?
Oh, don't start that again.
You did it.
I know. I walked right into that one.
Well, you could say it's a split decision, but a loss is a loss, and that's 4 out of 5 for him. In fact, it's 5 out of 6, except for the fact that Hector Lombard popped a drug test, and that got overturned to a no contest. So, I mean, it's just not looking good for Berkman. The way he fought that fight, he seemed like a guy who was only showing up to collect a paycheck. He did nothing that showed any motivation or desire. It was like, I'll stand in here and I'll do what I need to do, but not more than that.
All right, let's move on to Brandon Moreno beating Louis Smolka with a guillotine choke in the very first round at 223.
Huge upset.
Mm-hmm.
This one should arguably put Moreno in the rankings.
I would be surprised if it doesn't.
Yeah, he deserves it because he just beat the number 9 guy in the flyweight division.
As far as the prelims are concerned, Andre Fili beating Hakron Diaz 29-28 across the board. I think that's a good win for Fili.
It's respectable.
Now, what did you think of the armbar victory by Da Silva over Christensen?
Pretty good submission. I don't have more to say than that.
Mm-hmm. Decision. Here we go.
You want to talk about Nate Marquardt and Tamden McCrory, I know.
Yeah. The Barn Cat, yeah.
Well, I guess Marquardt proved he's not done yet.
And, if the Vikings need a field goal kicker,
I suppose so.
that kick was pretty brutal.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing with Nate Marquardt. He and Melvin Gillard have something in common where they just look like they're absolutely done. They lose a whole bunch of fights, and just when you think they should probably hang it up, they pull another one out of their ass. So you got to give it to Nate the Great. He finds a way to stay in the mix.
Did you see a knockout coming into this fight?
Well, he did knock out CB Dollaway, so we shouldn't have been too shocked.
I think this will elevate him out of the fight past prelims, though.
It could, but another loss would put him right back in it. He's on the bubble. I mean, just look at his last 10 fights, and it's not a great record.
No. All right. So, is there anything else on the Portland show? Because we got a lot of stuff to get through tonight.
No. Let's move on, my friend.
All right. So let's go to a preview, and we're going to briefly touch on this show. World Series of Fighting 33, Gaethje against Dugulubagov.
Ozzy Dugulubagov.
Gaethje 16-0, Dugulubagov 8-2.
Yes. So the lightweight champion is obviously the favorite in this fight, but don't look past Dugulubagov too lightly because 6 of his 8 wins have come by knockout or TKO, so he does possess some strength in his limbs, and he's also very good at taking opponents down and smothering them on top. Now, I don't find that to be a likely outcome for Gaethje because he was an All-American wrestler, he was a standout in college, and even though he, by his own admission, is a stand-and-bang guy who likes to get in people's faces and see if they can hit him as hard as he hits them, if he had to go into the well and dig deep and block some takedowns by stuffing them and then getting takedowns of his own, that's in his arsenal. It's just not the way he chooses to fight, but if Dugulubagov tries to turn it into that kind of fight, Gaethje can go there with him, no problem. So I think Dugulubagov gives him a good test, but I don't see any reason that Gaethje shouldn't be 17-0.
Yeah, I gotta go with the champ in this one. You're right, it is. And I think it's gonna sound weird saying it, but this is how I see it. It's gonna see what tools are in Gaethje's toolbox to deal with a different style, different fighter. Mm-hmm. Because
he's had a lot of people he's had a lot of people that want to trade hands with him, and Dugulubagov might not.
No, he might flip the script on him.
Mm-hmm. He's not going to fight him like Brian Foster did, and he's not going to fight him like Luis Palomino did. He's going to present a whole different game.
All right, so the co-main event is also very intriguing as Vinny Magalhães fights David Branch for the light heavyweight championship.
Yes, and as you note, it's very interesting because of the fact that David Branch could defend either one of his 2 titles. He has the middleweight title as well as the light heavyweight title. He's putting the 205 title on the line here. And Vinny Magalhães, if it goes to the ground, has every chance of winning this fight because the guy is an incredibly decorated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world grappling competitor. Many gold medals, many medals in general, many tournaments this man has won. And he is on a roll. He's won his last 4 fights. So do not take Vinny Magalhães lightly. If you only knew him from his stint in UFC, then you really don't know anything about him at all. And
that is basically our recommendation to watch this fight.
Absolutely. And David Branch, exact same thing. In fact, listen to what Ray Sefo had to say about it when I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, because he noted that both of these guys have improved, and it's because they get to be in a non-pressure cooker environment that, unlike the UFC, the expectations are different. They can just go out there and flow and be their natural selves, and they've become better fighters than they were because of that.
All right, so let's move on to the show in England. We kind of teased it in the open. Main event, has to be, I think it is. Actually, it is. Henderson's last fight, Dan Henderson, in his farewell fight, fighting for the championship of middleweight against Michael the Count Bisping.
Well, before I say anything else about UFC 204, I want to say my prediction is David Branch retains the light heavyweight title. You didn't make a pick, but you can if you want.
I'm going to go Magalhaes as an upset.
All right, we'll see what happens on Friday night in Kansas City, live on NBC Sports. But now back to UFC 204 at the O2 Arena in Manchester, England, which should be one hell of a show with Bisping and Henderson in the main event. Henderson's last fight ever. He either wins the title or he retires on a loss. But he's willing to take that risk because Michael Bisping essentially used the champion's privilege to call him out and say, come and face me. I want to get even. He said, revenge, they call it sweet. I call it better than sweet. He wants to taste that sweetness, the better than sweetness of getting even with Dan Henderson for what he did to him at UFC 100. For those tuning in for the first time who have never seen that fight, who don't know what we're talking about, Hendo knocked him out with a right hand after a very contentious season of The Ultimate Fighter, and then because Hendo didn't like him during the season, didn't like him before the fight, didn't like him at the fight, he gave him an extra punch to the unconscious body. Like, he just dove on him with a punch while he was already out cold.
Well, until the referee stops the fight.
It was not technically an illegal strike, but it was an unnecessary strike.
He could have given an extra second, let the referee come in and wave off the fight. He didn't have to. It was all that bent up frustration and anger, and we always say until the referee stops you, keep going.
And
like
if you watch
week,
if you watch the video packages building this up, the rematch, the video packages for it, Hendo admits he did it on purpose and he enjoyed doing it. He has no shame about that.
What's he going to do, get fined for saying that?
No, of course not. He wasn't fined then. He can't be fined now. But you can understand why Bisping looks at that footage and goes, how dare this fucker? I was out cold. There was no call for that. I'm going to get him. And at this point in their respective careers, I have every reason to believe he can, because there's a huge difference here. One guy's 37, the other guy's 46. One guy has beaten both Luke Rockhold and Anderson Silva in the same year, and one guy is just barely hanging on to his fight career and about to retire. And when you look at how they match up in the metrics, Bisping should have all the advantages. He has a 2-inch height advantage. He has a 1.5-inch reach advantage. And as long as he doesn't walk into a punch the way he did at UFC 100, I think the champion retains here. In fact, the odds makers would agree with me on that, because as of the recording of this show, we have Bisping as the second most sizable favorite on the main card, minus 235. Hollywood Hendo is plus 195.
A fool and his money soon part, Stevie.
Are you going to part with some money then?
I would bet money on Henderson.
Well, he has to find lightning in a bottle twice, and he does have that H-bomb, but you have to give him the opportunity to hit it. And in their first fight, Bisping circled to the right and basically, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, basically walked into the punch. I don't think Bisping makes that mistake twice.
So a couple of things. One, there will be blood.
Yeah.
And two, please tell me that Henderson comes out to the same song and the same entrance that Hamill did against Bisping.
I don't know, but I suspect...
The American flag in England with the double bird in the crowd. I know he won't, but just to see that image one more time of, like, what was it? Born in the USA. You want to come out to a pro-USA song at 4 a.m. with a very angry British crowd? You know what I mean? Just the thought of it is really amusing.
I honestly don't expect that. In fact...
No, I know.
If he comes out to any song it's probably going to be the same song that Kurt Angle comes out to, or did come out to in TNA.
Oh God, I didn't think of that. Yeah, you're probably right. Something about whenever a British and an American fighter fight in Britain, especially this time zone, it just throws me off a little bit. You know, we had breakfast with Fedor, we could have breakfast with Bisping.
I suppose so, but all I know is whenever Hendo fights, I'm going to want to see the movie Vision Quest again.
I don't think I saw it the first time.
You actually
Vision
should.
Quest?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where Lunatic Fringe comes from. It was the theme song to that movie.
Oh, cool.
So go out of your way to see it. It's one of the greatest wrestling movies of all time.
All right. Let's move on quickly to Vitor Belfort against Gegard Mousasi.
All right. Well, this one is the other long odds of the card. One guy pretty heavily favored. That would be Gegard Mousasi, minus 340. Over Vitor Belfort, minus TRT, plus 280.
I was going to say the TRT argument's going to come into play for sure.
Yeah, I think it has to. And we don't get any Brazilian bounce here because he's in Manchester, England. So the hometown crowd ain't going to give him any extra juice.
Oh, Stevie. Bad. Mousasi comes into this fight having fought 10 more times professionally. And usually you would go into an example of Mousasi, you know, there's not much tread on the tires. He's fighting a guy who you know, definitely has a lot of power behind him. Belfort, even in a non-TRT Belfort, still has some gas in that tank.
Well, he did knock out Dan Henderson to prove your point.
If he can stay away from that knockout, Mousasi, it's his fight to lose.
If there's a difference in striking and it's just based purely on that and put TRT aside, Mousasi is the better striker of the two of them.
It's going to be a good fight. Now, people are going to say TRT, you know, when it comes down to it, people are going to make that, not joke, but they're going to make that
assertion.
The assertion, thank you, that's what I was looking for. Where, TRT Belfort, if he loses this fight, would a TRT Belfort would have won this fight? But then again, TRT, it's like you're in the fountain of youth.
Mm-hmm.
So
keep getting more testosterone. You can do anything.
Mm-hmm. All right. What about Jimmy Manuwa against OSP?
This is where the line starts to get a little closer for these last three fights on the main card. We have Manuwa at plus 160 and Oben St. Preux at minus 140.
I got OSP winning this one, but this is right. This is a fight where the lines of favorite and underdog kind of blur a little bit here.
You're right. Could go either way kind of fight. And neither one of these guys has been the kind of dominant where you can just absolutely feel comfortable that one of them is going to for sure come out the winner. So just give me your best bet on what you think is going to happen. You know, don't even base it on the odds. Just say how you feel.
OSP by knockout?
I like that call. I would go with that one as well.
All right. Daniel
Melnichuk.
Thank you. Against Stefan Struve.
All right. Struve is the favorite here. So if you think that Stefan Struve is anything like the fighter of old that he used to be, then you can feel comfortable with a minus 170 line. But a Melnichuk at plus 150, it's playable. That's a dog I might bet if I was the betting man.
I've always liked Struve. I'm going to pick him in this one.
That's fair, but I feel like an upset is not unprecedented here, so I'll actually go with a Melnichuk, even though Struve is probably the better fighter on paper if it goes to the ground. He's proven he can be caught, even at 6'11", whatever he is. He can be caught standing because he makes mistakes that a guy his size shouldn't.
All right, let's go with Betic and Doan to wrap up the main card.
All right. Actually, I thought Yuri Alcantara and that's the Fox Sports 1 main event.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the line on Bektik and Doan. I had it on Alcantara and Pickett because I thought they were on the main card.
Bektik and Doan. Bektik 10-0, Doan 14-5. It's a good test for Bektik, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I don't see Doan winning this. I give it to Bektik. I think Bektik is on such a tear right now that Doan doesn't have the skill set to match Bektik here.
Well, he is training with the right group of people in Coconut Creek, Florida. You were just talking about earlier with Ill Will Brooks, so perhaps its American Top Team will get a little measure of satisfaction from seeing him score a big win here that Brooks could not.
And a win against Doan is something you can hang your hat on, too.
Yeah,
he's no pushover.
Doan is a quality fighter. I mean, you can't look at his record of 20 overall fights, 14-6. Of his 14, 6 knockouts, 5 submissions. So he's packing a lot of tools, and he knows how to use them. And even though he's lost 3 in a row, the 3 that he won before that were all quality fighters. Jared Papazian, Leandro Issa, and Marcus Brimage. He wasn't beating scrubs, and he didn't lose to scrubs either. The aforementioned Yuri Alcantara is one of the people who beat him.
It's true. Now, you mentioned Alcantara and Pickett.
Minus 165 plus 145. Alcantara is the favorite.
But why is this on the undercard? Is it because they want to put a big fight on the undercard? Because that's a good fight.
Yeah, I'm guessing this is to lure viewers into FS1. That's the only thing I can think of is that they want something going into the pay-per-view that'll really sell it.
And just going over the other fights really quickly here, there's one that does catch my eye. Leon Edwards and Albert Tumanov.
That's a quality fight too.
Yeah, I like that one. All right, so we have lots of news to get to, and let's just start with the big story off the top right now. There's a few big stories here, but this one's just hitting us now. UFC Fight Night 97 is the big show next week, Fight Night show in the Philippines. The main event is rumored to be pulled, canceled, however you want to say it, because BJ Penn reportedly has suffered an injury in training and is forced to pull out of the fight.
Yes, this report comes from John Morgan at MMA Junkie, and a lot of other people have probably reported it as well, but I'll just go ahead and quote from his report right here. The person in BJ Penn's camp was not allowed to speak publicly because the withdrawal has not been formally announced, but a person with knowledge said that he suffered an injury in training and would not be available for Fight Night 97 in the Philippines at the SM Mall of Asia Arena. So, they've got a problem on their hands because they've got a little over a week to either find a new opponent for Ricardo the Bully Lamas, or you've got a brand new main event of UFC Fight Night 97 that is not, it's not a bad fight, but it's not as marquee as BJ Penn and Ricardo Lamas. You're going to have the Black Beast Derek Lewis facing Marcin Tybura as your main event in the Philippines.
It's a shame because, he wants to go out and have one last hurrah. He's coming back for a fight that he's obviously wants to come back main event, but it is a Fight Pass card in the Philippines. Maybe he wants to, fight in front of the Philippine fans. Who knows? But it's really a shame when you see a fighter, a Hall of Famer. You can't tell he's not a Hall of Famer because he is. It's kind of a shame that a Hall of Famer comes back and a week before the fight, he gets hurt. Is it because he's too old? Is it because it was a fluke incident? We don't know.
I think we have reached that point where BJ Penn shouldn't be fighting anymore, and this is just a sign of that he's just not able to train at the level where he's not going to get injured if he goes out there and gives it his all like he used to. He's not able to physically dominate before the fight or physically dominate in the fight, and that is the time when you have to make the tough call.
It's not like it's in the dressing room before the fight and you're rolling around and you headbutt and your eyebrow explodes. It's not like that. It's just, it's a week out and it must be significant enough to pull out of the fight. If it was a minor injury, maybe he could have fought with it, but...
Well, since it hasn't been officially announced, watch them try to talk him into taking the fight anyway.
All right, so I'm just going to briefly mention this.
And you're going to let me go into the details, the ugly details? I did say we had some ugly stories, and this is one of them.
No. I'm going to start with something that usually I don't smile or feel good about someone getting beat in mixed martial arts.
Okay, you're going in a completely different direction than I thought.
Mikhail Materla blasted Rousimar Paul Harris this past week. Okay. And there's video evidence of Paul Harris who looks he's a wrestling analogy, and I apologize for the non-wrestling fans who listen to this podcast. His arms look like Scott Steiner.
Yeah, well, he's pretty much fighting only in Brazil these days, so whatever he can do that he doesn't get popped for, he's probably doing.
And he got knocked the F out. So maybe this will be a wake-up call for him. I don't know, but when I saw it first, I'm like, that's not Paul Harris. And then boom, like, oh, maybe it is Paul Harris. Like, it was one of those surreal things because his arms are massive.
Okay, well, you're calling for a wake-up call for a guy who
I know
had so many wake-up calls. He had a second chance in World Series of Fighting. They even put a championship belt on him, and he still couldn't change his ways. So, do you really expect him to change now, especially when you say he's got the largest arms in the world, when he's giving Chael Sonnen a run for his money?
Well played. All right, Bellator 163 announced Derek Anderson's fighting Paul Daly.
Yeah, so another big fight for that card coming up on November 4th at the Mohegan Sun Arena in Uncasville, Connecticut. So, something to look forward to. It should be a pretty spectacular card. In fact, let me just run down the announced lineup so far, because this card keeps getting more and more stacked as the days goes on. You've got Liam McGeary fighting Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis, with McGeary putting his light heavyweight title on the line. You've got a welterweight matchup between the Irish bad boy Brennan Ward and Saad Awad. And, of course, you just mentioned Paul Daly and Derek Anderson. But don't forget, there is a heavyweight debut that's been long anticipated, and it's finally going to happen. Pride legend Sergey Kharitonov is fighting Javi Ayala.
That's crazy.
That is a really good card. Bellator is rolling out some good ones in the next few months.
Now, have you interviewed Daly before?
Yeah, several times.
What's he like?
Very personable, very easy to talk to, very charismatic guy, always gives great quotes. Probably in the list of fighters that I most like speaking to before a fight, he'd be somewhere in the top 25 and maybe even top 10 or top 5. He's that good.
Wow. All right, so we go from a positive experience, Stevie, to one that it breaks your heart with Josh Salmon.
Yeah, this is where I thought you were going originally, and I'm glad you took us on a positive note to begin with, because there's nothing positive we can say about this. Last week, he and his roommate Troy Kirkenberg, who is an MMA ring announcer, were found in a very bad state. His roommate was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, and Salmon is still hospitalized. He's in a coma. Who knows if he's going to make it. Now, Salmon has had some troubles with drugs in the past and had written an autobiography about it, how he had turned his life around, but his girlfriend died not too long ago in an accident. I think actually she was his fiancée. I think they were engaged. And I'm not saying that that caused him to be depressed and turn back to hard drugs, but you might wonder. His mom says no, but his roommate's dead and he's in a coma. What are you going to think in this situation? It's hard to find other explanations, and between losing his girlfriend and losing his last 2 or 3 fights in UFC, it's not hard to believe the guy was depressed and possibly fell back into his old ways, which is very tragic.
And we're not talking minor drugs here, folks.
Yeah, he was doing hard drugs like heroin. He was not messing around with any nickel and dime stuff like a bag of weed. He was doing stuff that'll leave you a drug addict for life.
Now, allegedly, we don't have official, but this has been reported, yes.
All we know is his roommate was dead on arrival at the hospital, and he's still in a coma, so it's been going on for a week now, and it hasn't gotten any better.
Hopefully we'll have better news next week.
I hope so, and I hope his mom is right that Salmon was totally clean and there was nothing in his system, but toxicology will tell us one way or the other when it comes back.
And I don't know how we're going to segue to this next story, but Michael Graves has been removed from UFC Fight Night 100 after being arrested this past weekend on misdemeanor battery.
Yeah, that's no good.
If you want, now we don't know the details, we don't know the facts, it's still a fluid situation, but if you get arrested for misdemeanor battery, I'm sorry, but if this is guilty and he did this, what promotion was going to hire you?
I'm going to defer to MMA Chunky again. This one is just put up as a staff report. It's not attributed to anybody.
Okay.
But here's what they had to say about the situation.
Oh, no.
Graves and Sergio Moraes were set to face at the Ibirapuera Gymnasium in Sao Paulo for a fight where the event airs on FS1 following early prelims on UFC Fight Pass. UFC said, quote, "The organization is aware that Michael Graves was arrested on a misdemeanor battery charge. The organization takes this seriously and is in the process of gathering more information. He has been removed from his scheduled bout on November 19th as a result of the pending legal matter."
Stop me if you've heard this before, Stevie.
Yeah.
We have a replacement for Mr. Graves.
And he is?
Zakatao.
Wow, that's a fast turnaround.
That surprises me. A 3-round split decision win, and you're going right back into it, and you're going from Portland to Brazil.
I suspect they made him a very lucrative offer to take a second fight that fast.
Yeah. Also added on that card is Warley Alves against Kamaru Usman.
Your main event of that fight should be an interesting ranking battle for the light heavyweight division. Darth Bader against Rogerio Nogueira.
And Darth Bader is the replacement here.
That's right. He is another replacement because it was originally supposed to be the mauler, Alexander Gustafsson.
And, okay, if he wins this, I know someone listening is going to love this reference, but if we do see Bader win this fight, do we reinstate him as Darth Bader, or is he still relegated to Anakin status?
Well, after the knockout of Ilir Latifi, I felt like he'd earned it back right then and there because that was a much-needed performance on a rather lackluster fight night card.
But to man up and take this on, not short notice like Doan in his fight coming up, but it's a quick turnaround.
It is. I agree. And
so
I think this is a very intriguing card that's probably going to go under the wire with a lot of people because it's on Fight Pass, but I think this is one to look forward to.
Now, one last news note, and I'm going to leave this open-ended so you can answer it. Dan Henderson has named someone who has been his toughest opponent and also the hardest hitter he has ever fought against. Now, Henderson's fought a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Who do you think hits the hardest in his opinion?
Probably not Bisping.
Nope, not Bisping.
Maybe Vanderlei?
Exactly.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. UFC and World Series of Fighting, back-to-back, Friday and Saturday night. So, tune in, enjoy all the good stuff.
Unfortunately, I'll have to catch the replay.
Well, do what you gotta do.
Oh no, I want to make this real quick as well. Actually, Saturday is my 5-year wedding anniversary.
Well, happy anniversary.
Mm-hmm. I remember making the announcement 6 years ago on AMP when I was engaged, remember? Alright, well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. And as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.